Hi, welcome to the importance of making digital accessibility a district-wide priority, as told by someone with first-hand experience. My name is Mia Pomalis, and I have severe ADHD. Some of my most significant symptoms include auditory and visual processing delays, which can make understanding information feel like blinking and finding oneself suddenly transported to Albania with not a translator in sight on the bad days, and climbing a mountain on the good. People are pretty surprised to learn this about me, because I don't seem like someone who struggles. And they're even more surprised to learn about the accessibility tools I use regularly on my devices. Tools like captions, Lexent font, high color contrast, magnification, and text-to-speech. When I was the little girl on the left, not only did I not understand why my brain worked the way it did, but my learning materials weren't designed for it. When I was the teenager in the middle, I understood a little more about myself as a neurodivergent learner, but still only had access to limited digital tools designed with alternative users in mind. Now, as the teacher and coach on the right, I have a diagnosis, knowledge of accessibility and assistive technology, and my pick from hundreds of digital tools. In fact, since 2017, the number of EdTech tools available and in use has increased by more than 90%. According to Learn Platform's EdTech Insights, the average number of EdTech solutions accessed each month per school district in 2020 to 2021 was 1,449. Up from just 548 in the 2017-2018 school year. Unfortunately, not all tools are created equally, and not all of them are created with equity in mind. With so many new technologies available and technology use on the constant rise, so too is the need for increased awareness of digital accessibility. Students and adults just like me benefit from digital accessibility, be their struggle with ADHD, vision impairment, hearing loss, or any number of disabilities or factors that create barriers. And school districts are the frontline defense when it comes to knocking those barriers down. School districts have the power to ensure that from the very beginning, students have access to and awareness of the accessibility tools that can help them succeed. So, from hardware to software, purchasing to faculty awareness, digital accessibility should be a primary factor in the technology decisions of every district. Together, we'll take a look at some of the preventing factors and underlying problems with districts that don't currently prioritize accessibility and technology integration. Then discuss several recommendations for improvement and resources you can take to your district today. Let's get started. There are several contributing barriers and factors that prevent districts from fully prioritizing digital accessibility, including, but not limited to, confusion regarding what digital accessibility is, a desire to quickly meet legal requirements, uninformed purchasing and setup decisions, and inadequate training and support. Let's begin by making sure we understand what digital accessibility is, as well as some of the legal requirements surrounding it. Deque Systems, a digital accessibility company based in Herndon, Virginia, will break it down for us.
Imagine if 90% of the websites or mobile apps you use today locked you out. Everyone else continues to experience the convenience of mobile banking, the connectedness of social media, and the freedom of online shopping. But for you, they're inaccessible. For the 57 million people with disabilities in the United States, this is their everyday experience. People with visual, auditory, motor, speech, and cognitive disabilities rely on various assistive technologies and alternate methods of interaction to use digital documents, web, and mobile apps. People with visual disabilities may rely on screen readers, braille displays, zoom functions, or high-contrast colors to get value from what's displayed on screen. People with auditory disabilities often rely on captions or transcripts for video content. People with motor disabilities might require speech-to-text software or keyboard-only interactions. People with speech disabilities require a non-vocal means of interaction. And finally, people with cognitive disabilities often require thoughtful and organized layouts with clear direction. Digital accessibility is the practice of making digital documents, web, and mobile apps accessible to everyone, including people with disabilities. Accessible sites and apps are perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. Building accessible sites or apps can be tricky without the right guidance. The Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or WCAG, published by the W3C, is the standard rule set that defines what makes a site accessible. Developers, testers, app owners, and accessibility experts from around the world rely on these standards for proper accessibility testing direction. In fact, many U.S. federal government agency sites and apps are required by law under Section 508 to be accessible. This law includes the WCAG standard. In the U.S. and European Union, WCAG is being adopted across private sector businesses as well. Whether you're following legal requirements or proactively working to make the web a better place, practicing digital accessibility makes a real difference for millions of people.
Having a full understanding of what digital accessibility entails is crucial to developing an effective plan of integration and support, one that will ensure all teacher and student needs are met. Unfortunately, the term digital accessibility can be, to borrow a word from Dr. Fenley Atkinson, nebulous. Districts can get caught up in the access part of accessibility, and as long as students have access to and basic skills in the technology and tools, feel those requirements have been adequately met. As Dr. Fenley Atkinson puts it, however, accessibility is much more comprehensive than that. Deque Systems spoke to the legal requirements of the Web Contents Accessibility Guidelines, or WCAG, a set of rules used in the updated 508 section of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, which requires federal agencies to make their electronic and information technology accessible to people with disabilities. In addition, according to the National Center on Safe and Supportive Learning Environments, the Every Student Succeeds Act renews the federal government's commitment to equal opportunity for all students, while shifting more authority to states and districts to elevate the role of technology in planning and implementing innovative programs. This is the first time that Universal Design for Learning appears in K-12 education policy. Many guidelines, checklists, and standards exist for educational institutions to follow in order to remain compliant with legal accessibility requirements and build a solid foundation of digital accessibility in their schools. However, while these are useful tools and meeting legal requirements is extremely important, often too much focus is put on compliance and not enough on understanding the learners they serve. School districts have many responsibilities, and often things need to move quickly in order for them to stay on top of those responsibilities. Unfortunately, finding quick and easy ways to check the accessibility box can mean shortcuts are taken and important stakeholders in the conversation, the very people who rely on digital accessibility accommodations to begin with, are left out of the decision-making process. Several articles online have adopted the Center on Technology and Disabilities phrase, "Accessibility is more than just a checklist," to emphasize the fact that although compliance may technically be met, the needs of learners may not. The Bureau of Internet Accessibility uses an interesting illustration to put this idea into perspective. Just as a sport is much more than a list of rules and penalties, the accessibility whole is greater than the sum of its accessibility parts. Rules and parameters keep things in check. They help ensure that there is order, not chaos, and that the thing that is being used or viewed or played or enjoyed remains recognizable. But inside the boundaries is the action or the thing itself. Conversations with the stakeholders themselves is important to every decision made in the education realm, but sometimes it can be hard to know who those stakeholders may be. Earlier, I mentioned that people are often surprised to learn that I use accessibility features to comprehend information, because I don't seem like someone who struggles. Let's hear from the UTS Digital Accessibility Ambassadors, students who both use and promote the creation of accessible content in subjects.
Students explain digital accessibility.
Hi, I'm Jatin. I'm a third-year Bachelor of Business, Bachelor of Law student majoring in HR. I have a vision impairment and I'm classified legally blind.
My name is Bettina. I'm a recent graduate of a Bachelor of Technology and Innovation here at UTS. I'm now working as a project manager full-time. I like hiking, going to art galleries and concerts in my spare time. And I also have a profound hearing loss and I wear 2 cochlear implants.
My name is Jackson. I recently just finished my studies at UTS, doing the Bachelor of Technology and Innovation. I currently have a hearing impairment in both ears and wear 2 bilateral cochlear implants.
Hi, my name is Idham. I'm a third-year medical science student. I'm very funny, I think I like science, and I want to be a surgeon someday. I also live with a psychiatric illness that affects my everyday life.
Hi, my name is Ashley Wilcox. This year I began the Master of Teaching in Secondary Education. Prior to this, I have actually studied at UTS for quite a long time. I've studied journalism and education subjects. Unfortunately, when I was halfway through my journalism degree, I was in a head-on car accident that resulted in an acquired brain injury. I still have ongoing fatigue and concentration issues. That is why I am an accessibility student.
Most of these students have known disabilities, and all are active participants in the conversation. However, there are other students who would benefit from digital accessibility just as much, whose disabilities aren't known and/or aren't comfortable being part of the conversation. Districts sometimes base decisions on only students with reported or diagnosed disabilities, not taking into account students who haven't been diagnosed or reported a disability to the schools. Carissa Rund of the University of Wisconsin writes that the Madison Center for User Experience is often asked if accommodations can just be supplied for people with disabilities using assistive technology rather than go through the effort of making content that is accessible for everyone. The problem with that idea is that it excludes those people who have no official diagnosis or accommodation plan, or people who have no disability at all but still encounter difficulties that accessible content would address. According to Microsoft's Center for User Experience, around 62% of all users report that they have severe or mild difficulties using technology, but not all of those users identified as having a disability. Only planning digital accessibility to accommodate students with known disabilities or accommodation plans leads to exclusionary tech integration. In addition to and because of the factors we have discussed up to now, districts find themselves faced with underlying problems that prevent the full prioritization and implementation of digital accessibility. Purchasing and setup decisions, for example, should be informed by a district's understanding of the accessibility needs and requirements of its teachers and students. To quote Harold Levy, the former New York City Chancellor of Public Schools, "Schools buy stuff badly." The same can be said of districts at large. He points out that many of the technology purchasing decisions are made by people who haven't been in the classroom for years, if at all, and who haven't stayed current with updated technology and don't know how to evaluate it properly. Add to that a critical lack of understanding of digital accessibility, and districts end up purchasing products without looking into their accessibility capabilities or whether or not they can be paired with alternative solutions like extensions. Even when products are purchased with accessibility capabilities, those capabilities might never be fully explored. A district with a one-to-one Chromebook policy, for example, might hand students devices with built-in screen reading and dictation without being really aware of what those features can do. When purchasing a ThingLink license so that schools can create interactive content, the fact that it is fully integrated with Microsoft Immersive Reader might not have been a key player in the decision. And when setting up and administering devices and accounts for students, some districts choose to lock customization settings so that students can't change them, which is useful for ensuring devices don't wind up with inappropriate screen backgrounds, but less useful for turning on high color contrast or magnified cursors. Rather than setting devices up so that the accessibility features are easily toggled on and off, these features are sometimes only available upon request by administrators. Finally, in districts that do not fully understand or are not fully aware of digital accessibility, teachers and students can likewise find themselves uninformed. Without in-depth training and ongoing support, teachers and students are not aware of the tools available to them, unsure how to access accessibility tools, and/or are unclear how to use them. In addition to the development of exclusionary learning content that cannot be fully experienced by all learners, this leads to several issues. Teachers and students both become frustrated with technology, for example, when it seems unusable to them. Teachers ban certain features and tools because students discover and misuse them without understanding their true purpose. Stigmatized ideas of accessibility tools prevent students with no recognized disability from using them and cause embarrassment for the students who do. According to the Northwestern University School of Professional Studies, approximately 70% of online students who have disabilities do not disclose their disability or request accommodations, and many students with disabilities prefer completely online programs because they can use the tools they need without feeling stereotyped or judged for it. Even when teachers are fully aware and have in-depth knowledge of digital accessibility and its benefits, they may not be able to find, identify, or access the right tools that meet the needs of different groups of learners. On the New America Education Policy blog, Jenny Munez discusses the difficulty for ELL teachers to do just this. So, now that we understand the contributing barriers, factors, and underlying problems of school districts not prioritizing digital accessibility in their decision-making, what can be done about it? Well, many things, including but not limited to the evaluation of current digital accessibility uses, policies, and procedures, evaluation of new tools for digital accessibility before purchase, the provision of district-wide access to tools and features, and heightened education of teachers and students by building, training, and ongoing support into professional development syllabuses. The first and best place for a district to start is engaging in a digital accessibility audit and developing or revising its digital accessibility policies. There are many types and levels of such audits, but all have a common goal: measuring and evaluating the current levels of digital accessibility in the district's websites, instructional materials, available technologies, content, and current policies. Digital tools for conducting accessibility audits are available online. We'll take a look at a few in the resource section of this presentation, and companies like Deque Systems can be brought in to work with districts on a more structured, in-depth level, both in completing the audit and drafting an improvement plan. This document by UK-based company Equality Act Audits is a great example of what an accessibility audit completed for a school can look like. Open these presentation slides and take a look. A thorough audit will help district leaders examine and refresh their own understanding of digital accessibility and pinpoint areas of need that can be used to set improvement goals, inform decisions, and help revise or develop new policies. Having a digital or web accessibility policy, be it on its own or as part of a wider non-discrimination policy, is crucial to establishing accessibility as a purposeful, intentional initiative throughout the district. The World Wide Web Consortium, or W3C's, Web Accessibility Initiative recommends the following when developing a policy. Reference specific standards, example, WCAG, in policy documents so criteria is clear and consistent. Mention web accessibility throughout other documents to consider it as priority rather than an afterthought. Provide a public accessibility statement that communicates efforts towards improving accessibility, and ensure policies stay current as technologies evolve. Information from accessibility audits can also be used to build universal learning design principles into the technology integration plan, and to set clear goals for improvement. As the Center on Technology and Disability puts it, although accessibility checklists and online tools can help you develop more accessible content, they are not a substitute for the input of real users in your design process whenever possible. Throughout the school year and before new purchases or decisions take place, districts should seek feedback from users. Teachers and students with disabilities or difficulties that make them frequent users of accessibility features, and the CTD recommends asking users with disabilities to review content and establishing a simple form or single point of contact so that users can report barriers and accessibility issues. Let's check back in with the UTS Digital Accessibility Ambassadors to get an idea of what feedback from students might sound like.
What is your biggest barrier when accessing digital content in your studies?
For me, when I access digital content, when there's any audio that is being played or used and it doesn't have captions or transcript, I get really frustrated.
My biggest barrier is when the text cannot be converted into audio. This prevents me from being able to concentrate on very important information. Because I get cognitive fatigue, I actually have to go and recharge and refresh myself until a time when I can concentrate on it.
Captions. So for example, if captions that I cannot read or are misplaced, then it's really hard for me to keep up with content and be really engaged within class.
I think it's really difficult to stay on track when there's large blocks of text, and it's just really hard to keep track.
It would have to be incorrect formatting, including font size, style, and color scheme. But primarily for me, it's the ability to highlight text, as that's how my assistive technology reads documents back to me. What is your number one tip for making content more accessible for you?
Openly communicating with all students. whether they be in a lecture or a workshop about the access requirements.
My number one tip on making content accessible is always thinking from the student's perspective. Everyone has different access needs.
My number one tip for making documents more accessible would be consistent formatting in an accessible way. This would include a high color contrast scheme, consistent font size and style, and most importantly for me, the ability to highlight text.
My number one tip for making content more accessible is being open to getting it wrong. It won't be a perfect process, but your changes mean students with disabilities have access to quality education with equal opportunities.
Another tip would be when using slides in class or physical handouts, ensuring that those handouts or slides are electronically sent to the student so they're able to access it through the assistive technology to make it more accessible for them.
Who does accessible digital content benefit?
Me?
All students.
Everybody really, including you.
Accessible digital content benefits the student's learning journey. So from a teacher's perspective, this is going to enhance your teaching practice.
Accessible content benefits everyone, not just people with disabilities like myself. We often strive in inclusive environments and build relationships with not only peers with disabilities, but also peers without disabilities.
When it comes to evaluating those 1,400 plus digital tools to determine which your district should purchase, one of the handiest ways to ensure digital accessibility is to require the company's accessibility statement. Often when companies have designed tools with a digital accessibility in mind, they will include this information on their website, and even make their voluntary product accessibility template, or VPAT, available for download. The VPAT is a document that explains how information and communication technology products comply with the revised 508 standards for IT accessibility. You can click the logos on the slide to view the accessibility statements and VPATs for Flipgrid, Nearpod, ThingLink, and Edpuzzle. Any technology purchases should require an accessibility statement at the least, and a VPAT at the best. Additional recommendations for improving digital accessibility include providing accessibility tools at a district level, such as devices with full-range accessibility features built in like Chromebooks or Microsoft computers, or extensions like Mote or ReaderWrite, rather than making individual schools solely responsible. Or worse, teachers. Using the same or similar accessibility tools helps build an inclusive community and culture, and keeps factors like maintenance more consistent and less complicated. Also, opening settings as much as possible to allow customization of devices and programs on a student level, and/or pre-enabling features to make them easier to find and use, can go a long way towards usability and awareness. An example of this is configuring Chromebooks to always include the accessibility button in the system tray so users don't have to scour settings to turn on select-to-speak or dictation. The final recommendation for district prioritization of digital accessibility is to provide its teachers with meaningful training and awareness, requirements, and tools. Some teachers might cringe away from the idea of more training. Fair enough. Which is why it's such great news that digital accessibility can be paired with many other topics. When teachers review the district and school policies at the beginning of the year, the district's digital or web accessibility policy should be discussed so that everyone is on the same page and everyone understands the requirements. Anytime a new device or tool is purchased, its accessibility statement and features should be addressed and teachers given an opportunity to try them out. Accessibility can be paired with SAMR, TPAC, Google UIT, and many other technology integration frameworks that teachers learn throughout the year. Ongoing support is also key, be it provided by instructional coaches or technology integration specialists who can inform and advise teachers on the use of accessibility tools, particularly when it comes to helping establish who in the classroom would benefit. The more confident teachers feel about using the tools at their disposal, and the stronger their understanding of how these tools can meet their students' needs, disability or no, the better prepared they will be to encourage their students to explore the way they learn and leverage technology to take down barriers that might be in their way. Whether you're an education leader, ensuring students have access to the technology and connectivity necessary to participate in authentic and engaging learning opportunities, a coach facilitating equitable use of digital learning tools and content that meet the needs of each learner, or a teacher advocating for equitable access to educational technology, digital content and learning opportunities to meet the diverse needs of all students. You're going to need some tools in your tool belt to help your district make digital accessibility a priority and foster a culture of inclusion. Here are just some of the resources you can use to do just that. There are tools for completing audits of digital content and resources for forming purchasing processes that encourage evaluation of accessibility, automated checkers for everything from websites to documents to see how accessible your content is, information on accessibility tools from Google and Microsoft, extension and font recommendations. A little bit of everything for everyone. Share these resources with district and school administration, as well as teachers, to help your district grow in digital accessibility awareness and support. And so, we've come to the end of our journey. Few people would argue that digital accessibility in of itself is unimportant, and a lot of the barriers to providing it stem from a lack of understanding that leads to a lack of planning, that leads to poor purchasing decisions, that lead to frustration, and a lack of support. When districts understand that digital accessibility is more than just access to technology or the completion of a few checklists, that accessibility should be woven into everything from policy to purchasing decisions. That digital accessibility benefits more than just those with known disabilities. That the best source of information for understanding accessibility needs can be the students themselves, and that providing thorough training and support to teachers promotes both teacher and student equity and empowerment. They can establish a culture of inclusivity where every learner has what they need to grow and succeed. I had to learn about my own digital accessibility needs the hard way, mostly on my own and waiting for technology development to catch up. With hundreds of tools, an ever-evolving technological landscape, and a deep self-awareness, school districts can make digital accessibility a primary factor in their technology decisions, so that the students of today don't have to wait to understand and be understood.